Welcome to the Innovative Accountant Podcast, presented by Integrated Advisory by Wealthco. Join your host, CPA Tim Coquell, as he explores thought-provoking ideas, information, and best practices from leading experts focused on supporting the accounting profession and the integrated advisory community. Here's your host, Tim Coquell.
Welcome back to the Innovative Accountant Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Coquell, and we have a special episode for you today. You probably, for our listeners, are noticing that we're in a bit of a different setup. Really excited that our Wealthco group and in the Integrated Advisory Network has moved to a new location, and we have our own studio here now for our podcast. And I was assured from our marketing director, Brighton Udy, that it's going to help with improving the video and audio quality of this podcast, but probably not the quality of the host. So I'm going to, unfortunately, you're stuck with me. We're going to do our best in this new environment. And we've got an excellent podcast for you today. The focus of today, we're going to be focusing on attracting and retaining executive level top talent and asking some important questions like, what creative strategies are companies taking to find top talent? What are the current talent recruitment and retention related themes for 2023 as we move into this year? What is the future of work and the purpose of an office? There's lots of questions happening these days around remote work environments. We're going to talk about that. What new work arrangements are companies considering to attract the top talent? How does diversity and inclusion fit in? How does coaching and assessment fit in? So we've got a really full agenda here, and we've got the perfect guest joining us from Toronto, I think just north of Toronto at her cottage here today, Lisa Knight from LHH Knightsbridge. Welcome to our podcast, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And so before we get started, Lisa, I'll just maybe do a quick introduction to our listeners of your background. You've had an extensive career in the recruitment profession. And so just talk a little bit about that. So you're managing partner at LHH Knightsbridge with your practice focusing on VP, C-level, and board-level executive searches. You partner with clients of various sizes, but primarily, I understand, in financial services and professional services, helping them to advance their businesses and achieve their goals through the acquisition and optimization of top talent. I think it's that work, Lisa, that we've had the pleasure of working with you. You've helped us attract some really high-level professionals over the years, and we're very grateful for the work that you do there. You also work closely with the leadership development team in your company, crafting tailored solutions that incorporate assessment. We're going to talk about that today, and coaching elements into your searches, providing an integrated approach to solving clients' leadership challenges. There was an acquisition, I think, Lee Hecht Harrison acquired Knightsbridge in and around 2015, I think it was, Lisa, and you were sort of instrumental in some of that transition and ensuring that stability and direction was brought to the business during that significant time of change. With Highland Partners executive search for many years prior, managing a large team of 60 researchers and associates across North America. From your honors degree with the University of Toronto, obviously lots of credentials to have this important conversation today. Most importantly, married, 3 children, adult children, and enjoying some cold weather, I understand, today in cottage country north of Toronto. So how's your day going?
Oh, thanks for the overview. It's always nice to do a little trip down memory lane and be reminded of my past. Day's gone really well today. We had lots of bright blue sky and sunshine and cold minus 15 degree high temperatures. So, winter's here with a vengeance, but we're trying to embrace it for a few more days. And then my husband and I are going to head down to Panama to spend a few weeks there to soak up some sun, work remotely for a bit of time, get some vacation time in, and visit with our adult son and his fiance who are working and teaching in Panama.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're getting away from this cold weather that we sent you from Alberta. I think we got it a few days before you. So it's, we like to share where we can do that. So yeah, Lisa, I'm always interested in our guests and just kind of going back in time a little bit and sort of understanding where their passion came from and what they do. We have a lot of innovative people that come on this podcast, and I would definitely consider you one in the recruitment space. And so let's just talk about where that passion started and how you got involved in what you do today.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So I was actually born in small town Northern Ontario and ended up moving to Toronto to go to university, which is where I also met my husband, or the gentleman who became my husband and still is my husband many years later. I stumbled into the search profession, as many people did back in those very early days of the industry. It was not a well-known profession. And it was actually quite a fledgling profession because in those days, people would make a second career out of recruiting. They would build a great career in a profession, and then they would take their Rolodex, I'll use that old term Rolodex, and really recruit from people they already knew. And the company I was fortunate enough to start my career with was taking more of a research-based approach where they would use directories and books in libraries, pre-LinkedIn and certainly pre-internet, in fact, to break down organizational structures and try to understand, who was reporting to whom and who was who in which roles, and using more of a science-based and research-based approach to underpin the recruitment efforts. So that was the team that I started and built up and led over time. And I think what really appealed to me was I was very academic when I was a student, so I loved doing research. And this was corporate research, really understanding how corporations are structured and how roles and departments were structured, and really using that information to help my partners make the call regarding who they wanted to recruit. And then over time, I got more and more involved in making those initial calls. So that combination of, problem solving and trying to figure out where are we going to find these candidates morphed into, having those initial conversations with candidates to try to understand what was going to make them tick, what would cause them to be interested in maybe making a move. How could I convince them, if they were, true rock stars, that they should be a candidate for one of my client mandates? And so I did this work for many years, and then over time built this team. And then, we ended up being acquired by a North American or a global firm, and my mandate became a North American mandate. And through that, I think you mentioned I had a team of some 60 people at one point across North America. It was a little unwieldy, to be honest, but we were really excited and passionate about, finding that great talent to help solve our clients' problems. So it started off more of just a problem, a desire to solve, complex business problems on the people side, but then really morphed into helping those organizations achieve their goals through the acquisition of great talent. And that's really, I think, what drives me to this day. After more than 30 years in the business, I still, love finding that great rock star that a client might be looking for.
Yeah, perfect. And so was that time mostly, like you'd had a couple, you've been in organizations for a long time. So Highland Partners, was that sort of when you talk about building that research team, that large group, is that where that sort of started?
Yes. Well, it started with a predecessor company to Highland Partners. So It was a company originally with a different name that then grew and morphed and changed and so forth. But it ultimately became Highland Partners. But there was just the one organization that I was part of until leaving them at the end of 2003, at a point when the partners were selling the company to another search firm. And I had the opportunity to step away and sort of just think about what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. And that was when I decided to join Knightsbridge, because I really liked their platform and their business model. And it was just different than what everybody else was doing at the time.
So was that where more of that research-based approach kind of kicked in, or were both companies sort of doing a bit of that, or did you sort of take a lot of that process and sort of integrate that into Knightsbridge when you joined?
Very good question. Well, the industry by this point in time, I'm talking, this was the first 20 years of my career. So those first 20 years, the industry really did mature, and almost every search firm was following the same methodology, or a similar methodology, and had teams of what we call researchers, in the in the back office, so to speak, finding the candidates through various means, including, online and LinkedIn and so forth. And then there would be the partners that would do the interviewing and the client managing. So that was a very common construct by the time I left Highland Partners. What I did, what brought me to Knightsbridge was my desire to move out of that big people and team leadership role and become a client-facing, business developing partner with my own clients, and with the mandate to actually, acquire business and then fulfill that business with the support of others.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And so your focus in professional financial services, how did that evolve as you sort of started to build your own client base?
Well, I didn't start there, except insofar as I did a lot of work for Knightsbridge, the firm itself. We were quite a young company, and so they were my first client, actually. Really actually bringing on board individuals to lead our assessment practice, our coaching practice, senior consultants in career transition, and so on. So that was a lot of fun, and it really helped me hone my skills. But I didn't move into financial services as a area of focus until after we were acquired by LHH Harrison. My predecessor, who had at the time led the search practice, he also owned the financial services and professional services vertical. So I focused on other sectors like energy, retail and consumer. That's really where I spent a number of years. But I'd always had a passion for financial services because I did a lot of financial services work when I was in Highland Partners. And so when the opportunity presented itself post-acquisition for me to step into a leadership role, I also had at the same time the opportunity to resume my work in financial services, and I happily stepped back into it. So since that time, I work predominantly with wealth management companies, insurance companies, consulting firms, asset management firms, pension plans, just a wide array of different players in professional and financial services. And it's very, very rewarding. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's obviously been our connection as well. And with our listeners being, Innovative Accountant podcast, most of our listeners are professionals in the accounting community or the financial services space. I think it's important that you're able to be here today to share sort of that specific experience as it relates to their challenges. Every firm or member we talk to, the number one issue is people. And, we're going to dive into some of these issues as we go through that today. But yeah, it's been interesting to see how your experience has evolved. Let's talk about Knightsbridge overall, like the services that it provides. Let's just walk through that, because obviously there's the attraction, the bringing on candidates, but just walk through what you are doing for corporate clients today and how you're helping them.
Absolutely. So the organization LHH Harrison Knightsbridge is what we're called today, and we are a subsidiary of Adecco. So Adecco, in fact, is a very large 25 billion euro publicly traded company based in Switzerland, focused in the staffing industry. LHH is one of their large business units, and we are part of LHH. And what LHH and Knightsbridge do is a combination of attracting great talent for our clients. So we have 3 recruitment practices, the executive search practice where I play, an executive interim practice where we place leaders on contracts, long-term contracts, at the executive level. And then we have a professional search practice. So that just tucks in just below the levels at which the executive search team operates. But in addition to our 3 search practices, we also have a whole team of consultants and professionals that focus on assessment and coaching, 2 of the key ways that we also assist our clients in making sure they're getting the best out of their talent. And these teams in assessment and coaching also work closely with us in recruitment, because at the end of the search, there's usually an opportunity to assess the candidates for a good fit, and then to coach them as they come on board to make sure that they're going to hit the ground running and be really optimized in the role. And that's where we've worked really closely with our colleagues in assessment and coaching to ensure that there's a really nice point of integration, and that what we learn about our clients along the way gets transferred into their understanding of what these finalist candidates need to be and do in order to be successful in the client environment. Yeah. And then our third business is our career transition and mobility business. And it's kind of funny that I call it our third business, because for many years it was our first business. It's really what Knightsbridge was best known for. And that is when companies have a change in direction, or when economic situation requires a downsizing or what have you, and there are people that need to exit an organization. We are one of the biggest players in the world as it relates to helping those people find a new home. So we have a whole plethora of consultants that work with individuals to help them transition, and they help they help them with their resumes, and they help them to understand what their kind of new path forward should look like. Do they want to just do something very similar to what they've done in the past, or are they looking for something completely different? And so that's a whole other form of consulting support that we provide at LHH Knightsbridge, and companies know us very, very well in that sphere as well.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially over the last number of years with COVID and, downsizing and just lots of that going on. And then now there's like impending talk about recession. I'm sure that is a critically important part of your business. Absolutely. And it's interesting how there's this sort of counter-cyclicality built into our business model. One would presume that, in tough economic times, there's slowdowns and layoffs, and that actually feeds our career transition business. And then in, busy economic times, there's lots of hiring and need to develop your talent, and that really feeds our leadership consulting and search businesses. And that's been a very kind of typical model for us. We've leveraged that and this served us very well. But there's lots of signs that with this new kind of pending economic downturn that we're all expecting, that it's not going to follow the same formula as what we've seen in the past. And while the economy may be slowing down, it doesn't appear that hiring is going to be slowing down. So it's a real conundrum that companies are going to have to work through. How do they cut costs and keep their businesses profitable and viable and successful, but not lose the top talent that they need, because they can't really afford to let people go in many instances. There are some layoffs, but we're not expecting there to be as many as we've seen in previous recessions or semi-recessions, whatever we want to call this period that we're in right now. Well, that's it. It's interesting from being involved in the wealth management business. We're always looking at those types of things. And, I think the thing that softens this recession is that, pretty much, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but what we hear is pretty much if you want a job, there is one, right. That there is such a shortage of labor that it's a different type of a recession. So it's kind of, I think what you're saying is you're still seeing people trying to recruit and hire despite the fact that things are slowing down a little bit. Most definitely. There's been no slowdown in hiring that we've seen. And there's still a war for talent out there. There is, I think there've been a lot of people who have, either retired early. Something like 30% of the retirees of last year were early retirees, unplanned early retirees, which can be very challenging for the organization to work around. Yes. But there's also need for more talent than we have to fulfill a lot of the roles that are out there. And increasingly at the senior levels, companies are looking to upgrade their talent, looking for something different, something new in their next chief financial officer or chief operating officer or chief human resources officer, realizing that industry is changing, business needs are changing, and therefore what we're looking for in our leadership folks needs to be upgraded to keep up with those changing circumstances. And that's what's driving, I think, a lot of the needs that we see. Yeah. That unplanned retirement piece, like what early retirement. Like, what do you think's driving that today? What, we've been seeing that and hearing a lot about that as well. What is leading to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's probably a number of factors, and certainly perhaps more that I don't know or don't understand. But certainly people, there's a burnout factor. So if you can afford to step away and you're exhausted, and certainly through the COVID experience, through the pandemic, there was a lot of exhaustion, a lot of burnout. Yeah. People just decided to step away. I think people are, realizing that they have currency and that they can reinvent themselves, show up differently, find a different place to work, decide the parameters within which they want to work. And so they are stepping away from work and kind of just reevaluating what work is going to look like for them in the future. So it's not necessarily retirement and never working again. I think it's retirement and then reinventing of oneself in a different form, in a different way of looking at work. And this is really a huge amount of fuel for our interim management practice, because a lot of executives are saying, I don't want that full-time gig anymore. I want to be, working on projects, doing interesting work. Place me, as an interim head of technology or an interim, head of sales or marketing, and I can go and do some really cool work, help with a big project, a big initiative, and then go and do it again somewhere else. And that seems to, fuel a lot of people's interest in doing interesting work without being tied down to something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think COVID definitely had pushed the pause button for a lot of people to kind of reflect on their careers, their life, and how they were going to maybe make some changes to make themselves happier. So it's definitely playing out.
I think the happiness factor is an important one to lean in on for a moment, because people, I think up until the pandemic, people thought that you had to work a certain way. It was expected. It was required. It was the talk track that we gave ourselves every morning. But through COVID, we became aware of the fact that there's a whole lot more to life than work. And other priorities began to emerge: self-care, wellness, and mental health, families, and the importance of being there for our children and for our elderly parents and, the folks that were most vulnerable during the pandemic. I think a lot of people really, had a major, rethink about the importance of work and where it fits in the whole construct of who they are as a human being. And that's led to a lot of rethinking of the nature of work, of, people who can retire choosing to do so, and others choosing to kind of reinvent themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting times for people making those choices, but also for companies. And we're going to talk about, what you're seeing on that and some of the themes as we move forward here. But before we jump in there, I just want to talk a little bit about, back to the profession, the financial services industry. What are some of the types of roles you're finding that most companies are focused on filling these days at those higher levels? Like, has that changed? Is it because some of the senior people are stepping out of the workforce, retiring earlier, adjusting lifestyles? What does that look like today? What are the companies that you're dealing with really, who are they really focused on placing?
So from what we see, and of course, this is what we see. I think if you were talking to a different search person in a different firm, they may see something a little bit different than what we see. But, when we talked about retirement, often it's the CEOs that have the option to do that. And so I think we've seen a lot of turnover at the CEO level, and a lot of boards, coming to us asking for our help in finding a new CEO for their organization. So that's been a very dominant role in our mix over the last 12 to 18 months. Certainly all the chief level roles: chief financial officer, chief operating officer, chief human resources officers, head of talent, heads of technology, and on the consulting side, very senior consulting partners in, digital, in AI, in automation. So lots happening on the technology front. No surprise there, but I would say an equal emphasis on organizational leadership, broadly speaking, and on people leadership. Those would be the big ones that we see a lot of, and where there's a lot expected of these new leaders coming in. I think perhaps some different attributes than what was sought after in the past.
So let's talk about how that's changing and what those qualifications look like for those roles. Like, has that evolved? What is expected? Not every CEO is cut from the same cloth. What are they looking for differently today? And how do you help them assess that?
Well, so I think let's start with what's the same. What's the same through, pre-COVID and right through till today is those underlying sort of technical qualifications. Every role has them, always has, and continues to require those underlying technical skills. Where we're called in and where our, I think, greatest contribution lies is in understanding not just that the candidates have those underlying important qualifications, but that in addition to those, they have the right leadership qualities and the right approach to leadership that will enable them to be successful in the environment. So it typically starts not with a review of the role, but rather with a review of the organization. Where is the organization today, and where is it heading? What are some of the big challenges? What are some of the big opportunities that this organization is facing? What is it going to take for this organization to be successful in the future, not today? And if you look at it from a future-focused perspective, then you start to build the profile of that next leader, be it CFO, CHRO, CEO, with the future in mind. And it becomes very clear as you speak to the stakeholders, and there's a lot of stakeholdering that we do at the front end of every search to really get all the inputs that we require. They're the ones that can tell you exactly what's going on in the industry. They can tell you, what was missing in the previous incumbent. And as we often find, it's a combination of, that strategic agility, the ability to be bold, to be visionary, to see around corners, to anticipate where the business is going, coupled with the ability to bring people along, to create the kind of environment where individuals want to build their career, to create leaders that can then cascade that capability and quality to the leaders that they lead, and then so on and so forth down through the organization. It's about inspiring, not necessarily just followership, but inspiring others to be leaders in the organization. And with that leadership, I think some of the just kind of finer points include things like being empathetic, being a good listener. It's not standing on the hilltop and saying, "This is where we're going, follow me." It's being authentic and genuine and caring and being a great listener and creating an environment where people can make a strong contribution and be heard. And that's going to be the type of leadership qualities that I think most of my clients are looking for, and that really will distinguish the successful companies in the future.
Yeah, for sure. That balance between EQ, IQ, strategic planning, like you say, empathy, and all of those pieces are critically important. How do you assess that though? So a lot of those, the technical stuff, it's kind of easy to go back and maybe get references, or you look at their training, technical training. It's usually easier to sort of figure that out. But how do you figure out some of those other skills, those leadership things? Are there tools that you use in your process? You talked about, attracting, then that sort of coaching and piece of that. What are you using today to identify that in strong candidates?
Well, I couldn't tell you that, Tim, because that's a secret sauce. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, this is why I'm asking.
Yes, I'm not. No. So it isn't really that magical at the end of the day. We create a very comfortable environment for our candidates, and we engage them in conversations much like the one we're having today. We want them to tell us their stories and tell us about not just what they've accomplished throughout their career, but how they've gone about accomplishing those things. And it's really in asking the right questions, digging into not just the what, but the how, that you can start to really understand the MO of a leader, and what kind of leader they are, and the tools that they use, and the tactics that they've deployed, what's helped them to be successful. You listen for humility. You listen for times when they have failed and what they've learned from it. So it's the science and art of interviewing is something that really is that combination of art and science. And over years and years and years, you build up a capability. You build up intuition, which is nothing more than the sum of experience, I think some have said. But it's really a combination of asking great questions, knowing what to listen for, keeping that blueprint in your mind of what the client is trying to accomplish. And then, bringing the candidate through this journey with you. It has to be right for them as well. At the end of the day, we don't want candidates that are not delighted and excited and keen to take on the challenge. I mean, that enthusiasm and motivation has got to be there in addition to everything else that we're looking for. But when we get down to, it, we will narrow the slate of candidates, but our client then also has to interview them, and they'll be asking some of the same kinds of questions, listening for the same types of things that we're listening for. We actually build the question list for our clients so they can be consistent and they can ask the same things of all candidates and do a compare and contrast to do a relative assessment as well as an absolute assessment of the candidates. And then at the end of the process, we do a combination of reference checking, and we have this assessment tool that we have available as well, which not all clients participate in. Some have their own assessments, others don't support wanting to use an assessment, but we always recommend it because it does add a lot of scientific rigor to, the process that we've all been through together. And, the proof, I guess, is in the pudding. When we look at our success rate, we close about 90% of the searches that we are awarded, which is a very high percentage.
Wow.
And we have a 96% stick rate. So 96% of our searches, those candidates are still in role a year later. And often well beyond that. But that's what we track. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, that science art explanation. So we've had other podcast guests on here where we've talked about profiling and some of those pieces. So you mentioned assessment tools. I know even in our process in the past, we've used things like Colby, Print. There's lots of different tools that are out there. How important do you think it is for companies to be using some of those tools to make this more about science than sort of a gut feel? Everybody goes to interviews and you're kind of like, I like that person, or I think, and there's probably companies that just want to hire based on that. But making sure that the person is right for the role, they kind of check all the boxes, as you say. How important is using some of those profiling tools in that process from your perspective?
Well, I think it's very important, Tim. I think at the same time, though, if you follow a very thorough, objective, third-party led search practice or search process, you can be very confident even without an assessment. But if you don't do a full search, that's when assessment becomes absolutely essential, in my opinion. It's a great value add if you do a search. It's an essential tool if you don't, because otherwise you really do run a high risk of simply, following your own biases, falling in love with someone who's an awful lot like you or an awful lot like the other people in the organization, not challenging yourself to think more strategically or more scientifically about what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and does this new leader actually help you get there? So I think that, there's huge value in both search and assessment. If you do neither, I think you're taking a very big risk.
Yeah. Okay. No, and in our company, we've seen the benefits of both of that. So that's great advice. I appreciate that. Let's segue a little bit. I just want to talk, and you've touched on some of these things, but I want to talk about So what are the themes as we roll into 2023 here? You've got companies that are recruiting people. What are the challenges that they're facing? What are the themes that are sort of rising to the surface? And I think everybody could probably name a few, but from your perspective, what would the core, maybe 2 or 3 things be that companies are trying to address?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that companies are grappling with right now is this whole return to work construct. To what extent, especially, for companies that have mostly desk workers or knowledge workers, the pandemic gave us not just permission, it kind of forced us to figure out how to work remotely, proved that we could work remotely in many cases where we hadn't in the past. And now companies and individuals are both looking at this and saying, what next? Everything that we hear suggests that most companies are trying to encourage people back into the office as much as possible. And everything that we hear says that most individuals don't want that. So we are in a bit of a conundrum on that point. And I think that's one of the big ones that needs to be solved. I also think that, companies are really wrestling with retention. There's been a lot of turnover of talent, a lot of loss of talent. Individuals are leaving often for more money or for more flexibility. If they are being forced into the office and it's not to their liking, that's going to, not sit well with individuals. People today do have a lot more power in the employee-employer power balance. More of it sits with the employee. And so they're choosing to work where they can feel like they have more flexibility. That's a big, big deal. So that too goes back to that, work construct, work from the office, work from home, or some kind of hybrid. I think that's a big tool in the retention toolbox that companies are going to have to, come to grips with. But money is a big one. As I touched upon, I think, with the current economic situation being what it is, typically salary is not a big driver for people to be attracted to new roles. But right now, companies can use money to attract talent, and money talks. It's gone from like number 6 on the list of reasons why people make job changes to number 1. And that's a remarkable shift over the course of a single year. But the cost of living has gone up so significantly in the last year that it's an understandable outcome. And so with that, I think companies have to, really consider, do I just throw money at the problem? Well, nobody thinks that's a really good solution. So, I think you have to think about other ways. You have to be, a fair payer. You have to be competitive. You have to keep your eye on the market and know what competitive is. But by the same token, I think smart employers should be thinking more broadly about that whole employee value proposition. What are we offering?
The whole package. Yeah.
The whole package. What are we offering? Why would people want to come here? Why would people want to stay here? And there's so much more than money that you can consider and that you need to consider, like flexibility, like creating an inclusive place to work, like mental well-being, wellness and mental health, all the programs associated with that. It's a huge deal right now. And not just offering programs, but making sure that they're being used, making sure people take their vacation and know that they can and shouldn't feel like they're some kind of low performer for wanting to have time away from the office. So I think, companies come to us all the time and say, what can we be doing to retain our top talent? And there's a huge array of ways that companies can act on these initiatives and create a more compelling and robust and positive place for people to come to work.
No, that's a perfect overview and summary of some of those key things. So the things that I heard out of that was we've got this remote flexibility as a big theme right now. The second piece you talked a lot about was, retaining people, labor shortages. It's supply demand. Like the employees are requiring more income and to deal with finances, inflation, all those things, but that's putting a lot of pressure in the system on, okay, how do companies deal with that? And then the third piece, which you touched on a bit, I want to just sort of comment on it. So it's that inclusion or that diversity conversation. How much is that you're finding coming into play as well into the current environment?
Well, I think it's become a huge component of what we do, Tim. To be honest, I think we on the search side don't spend as much time on the inclusion part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. Our focus tends to be more on helping our clients meet their diversity goals. And so literally every search we do is done with a view to creating a diverse shortlist. And I will say, okay, I recently crunched these numbers for another client that I was chatting with recently and was really super pleased to see that last year, 73% of our placed candidates actually helped our clients achieve their diversity goals. They were either women or people of color that we place in these executive positions across all industries, including financial services. And people always say to me, financial services, it's all, white men. Well, if you look hard, you can find great talent that does actually represent the diverse and makeup of our society, and we can help our clients achieve their goals that way. And I'm super proud of being able to do that. And then the companies themselves, sure, once they get that talent, it's only part of the answer. The rest of it is how do you create the programs inside the organization so that people feel like they belong. And this sense of belonging is one of the key metrics that people are looking for when it comes to, where they work. They want to go to work and feel like their work matters, that they're respected, that they're heard, that they're being developed, and that they belong. And if you can't make people feel like they belong, regardless of their gender, their ethnic background, their sexual orientation or preferences, then you're going to have an issue as it relates to, retention and engagement of your workforce. Conversely, if you can build that kind of environment, you're going to create a phenomenal place for people to come to work. And ironically, without forcing your employees to do so, they'll actually want to come to the office fairly frequently because they're going to feel like that's a great place to hang out and be with other people that they want to be with.
Well, and I think that's a great segue. So if we sort of tackle these three areas and we start with kind of that remote environment, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that companies, I think, felt through COVID was, they might have been ready to go remote. They might have had the technology to go and do that. But how do you maintain that culture of belonging? And how do you do that from your kitchen tables? And I think that's in talking to, companies and groups through this podcast or just in my travels, that was a challenge. People weren't really ready for that. And so let's go back to that because, there's a survey that came out recently, and I think it said something like 80% of Canadian remote workers would quit their job if their employers asked them to return to the office 5 days per week. So when you hear studies and surveys and things coming like that, that's a big deal. And so I'm interested in your experience, and let's maybe tackle it from both the employee and then the employer's perspective. Is that what you're hearing from employees? Like when you're out finding talent and you're talking to talent and you're looking at putting them in these positions, how important is that today, that flexibility, that they want to work from home? They want 2-3 days. They want that flexibility. Like, is that as prevalent as some of these studies suggest in your experience?
In my experience, at the leadership level, it's very rare for an individual to say, I feel I need to work remotely all the time. They know that as a leader of teams and as part of the executive team, they need to come together on a pretty regular basis. And so the expectation of senior leaders is that they will spend time in the office, but most of them do not want to be told that they must spend time in the office, and most of them do not want to spend every day in the office. And and this is true for the leaders, But as soon as you get down to high level sole contributors, it's a whole different game. Those are the folks that actually do not want to come into the office for the most part. They're the 80%, I think, that survey is referring to. And it's certainly been my experience that high functioning, expensive, top end, high performing sole contributors, and probably everyone, below that level, if you will, would feel the same way. I can do my job remotely. I prefer the flexibility. I don't feel like I need to have Big Brother watching over me. I get more done at home. I don't have to waste my time commuting. I don't have to put on makeup and high heel shoes and spend all that money on all that, it's just issue after issue. And it's all from an employee perspective, piling up in favor of being able to work remotely and having the trust of their boss that they can work remotely. Now, this does, though, beg the question, can employers trust their employees to be doing the work? And how do you lead and how do you hold people accountable in this new world? This is causing a whole new approach to leadership, because this is not leadership by walking around or leadership by looking over someone's shoulders, or, for individuals can't prove that they're getting the work done simply by being present. But the truth is, they were never getting the work done by being present. And so this is really just about measuring output and being more deliberate about setting goals and being more deliberate about communicating with your employees and creating platforms for people to come together and, do soft collaboration and share information and share ideas. And we've done it on screen for almost 3 years now. So it absolutely can be done. And furthermore, it can also create a more inclusive workforce for people that have, say, certain disabilities and for whom it's difficult for them to come into an office. You can create a much more inclusive workforce for folks for whom that is the case. And so I think, again, if you look at it from the employer side, are you really going to create a more productive environment by forcing people into the office? I don't think so. I mean, I think you could make the case that it's easier to collaborate. It's definitely easier to do things like onboarding new employees. And it's definitely easier for building connective tissue and that belonging. So that's the thing that notwithstanding what every individual seems to want, all this flexibility and ability to work from home, what I think the price we're going to pay over time is the loss of culture. It's really hard to build culture remotely and to maintain culture remotely. So I think what the challenge is going to be is to find that right balance of not forcing people back into offices, but drawing them back in, making them want to come together on a frequent enough basis that you do have a good culture and you have the chance to positively reinforce that culture through activities and, rewards and sharing of successes and things that you actually do need to get together to do. I think that's probably what the purpose of the office is going to morph to become, more than just a place to work and, sit in your cubicle and put your headset on and do what you could have done at home just as effectively.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Is actually my next question was going to be, you've got fully back to the office, you've got hybrids, and then you got fully remote. It's sort of the plus and minuses of each of these. And you did a great job of kind of explaining, the culture is maybe a little easier in onboarding versus, remote, you got flexibility, but then you've got to try and create that engagement. And it's just interesting. Right. Are you finding the leaders in your clients, in these companies that you're dealing with, where's their mindset at with all of this? Like, I look at, like, in the news, you got Elon Musk who comes in, lays off 50% of the workforce on Twitter, and then says everybody else is coming back to the office. Like, everybody, if you're not in the office, you're done. And so it's just a great example of really strong views and opinions on this. What are you finding with the companies that you're dealing with today? Do you find you've got people in that camp, you got people in the other camp that are, and how are they sort of working their way through that? And where do you guys fit in helping them with that?
Well, we do have, clients in both camps. I wanted to be able to say, oh no, all of our clients are so enlightened and so Canadian and polite, and nobody's forcing anyone to do anything. But that's not the case.
No.
We do have, in fact, some of our clients, I would say, in manufacturing environments, for example, where all through COVID, to keep those plants running, people had to be physically present. And so the business leaders would say, listen, it's not fair for all these office workers to be able to work remotely when all of these, plant workers have to come to the office every day. We have to create a consistent approach here. And so we did have clients that forced their employees, their office employees, back to work, even when it wasn't safe to do so. It was quite disturbing and very challenging. And in one case, I actually fired a client, which is the only time I've ever done it in my career. But I just didn't want to represent that organization to the candidate market because I didn't believe in forcing people to work in an office when they didn't have to. So I think they are the outliers, unless you've got a situation where it's a must-work environment, must be physically present environment. Most of our clients, not all of them, but most of them are more open to some kind of hybrid arrangement. They really want to encourage their employees to come back. A lot of them believe it's better to be together. There's more value to be gained by sharing, by something a client and I coined the other day was an accidental accelerant. This meeting in the hallway asked a very good question of the head of talent acquisition, actually, in this case. And she came back with a plan for what she was going to do. And it's really caught fire. And it's a very, very positive, exciting new direction that they're going to take with their talent acquisition approach. It wouldn't have happened had it not accidentally happened in the hallway. So, those kinds of things, companies are very mindful that there's value to be had if you can physically be together. But as soon as you start forcing people together, you get the backlash. So this is the walk that all these, leaders are currently managing through. And they seem to be finding their way, but I suspect they bump their toe from time to time. Yeah. It's not easy.
Yeah,
and there's no blueprint for us. We're all figuring it out as we go along.
No. Exactly. I love the accidental comment you made there. Like most of the creative things happen when you're bored or when you're not structured. And, I look at it even in our own company, you're exactly right that having those interactions that turn into a conversation that wasn't anticipated can change your company. And those are tough to do when you're trying to do that over Teams and Zoom all the time. So it is trying to find that balance. And it sounds like the companies you're dealing with are working to create flexibility for people that are saying, no, I want more flexibility. I don't want to be told. But at the same token, they've got to then measure that success and whether a person working remotely is being productive. And that's creating a whole other, and this isn't maybe your area of expertise. It's maybe more in the legal profession, but you're hearing, time theft. And there's, for our accounting community, there was a court case in BC here in the last few weeks where I think it was an accounting firm or accounting group let go of an accounting employee, and they sued the company, the employee, for wrongful dismissal. And then the company countersued based on time theft, that they were working remotely and actually not doing the time they said they were doing. And they won. And so it's a really interesting precedent that's being set right now because of these changes that everybody's trying to figure out. It's sort of like, okay, well, if we can't see you in your desk, to your earlier appointment, or I can't sort of see that you're working, even though we know that's kind of irrelevant. How do we start to create some systems that actually measure that? And I think that's probably, as you start to think of technology and measurement, it's sort of this next evolution of where we're going. But man, you got all these issues that are emerging from how do you, is it okay to track people's time when they're at the computer, their mouse clicks? This is a whole new world for everyone, right? And I'm sure you're on the front line of that as people are trying to hire and you're creating flexibility. It's hard to kind of get around.
It is, and you're right. There are ethical aspects to it. There are legal aspects to it. There are technology aspects to it. And at the end of the day, if part of what you're trying to create is a trusting relationship with your employees on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you're watching them while they work remotely. You're kind of working at cross purposes here. So that's not necessarily the answer either. I think, what it comes down to is having the right systems, having the right leadership and leadership approaches so that you are actually measuring the right things, not just time at a desk, but really productivity and output,
right?
Which is what we should have been measuring all along. But I think managers were lazy. Measure results, absolutely, not time.
So it's getting clear on KPIs and leveraging technology to get better reporting on how projects are moving along and where they're at. I agree entirely with what you said. I think that's the next iteration of this for companies, and we can't be lazy anymore about it. We can't think just because somebody's sitting there and we can see them that we're getting the results we need out of that. So, and
we never could, by the way, but we always thought we could.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, so we talked about that remote work, obviously an important piece. You're seeing that, you're helping companies be more flexible, especially as they're attracting that talent. That's an important piece. Let's talk about the income piece now for just a minute. You've got it in the employees' hands today, being able to go, okay, there's not enough talent. This is what I'm worth. If your companies that you're dealing with that have a hard time sort of passing that increasing labor cost on, what are you coaching them to do to still attract that type of talent and not make it just about more cash? How do you create a program and entice those people to go that I'm going to do that without it just being about the money? Get them back to where money's number 6.
Right. Well, so one of the things I didn't mention is that as part of my client base, I actually do work with a number of government agencies, like on the regulatory side in financial services, for example. That's where it ties back to my financial services practice. But a lot of these government agencies, financial regulators and the Ontario Securities Commission and these types of entities, they don't have unlimited funds, and they cannot just pay whatever, the market demands. They are mandated by government as to how they can increase salaries. And it's very restrictive. Similarly with a lot of the pension plans, the government pension plans, they can't pay market rates. They have to pay what the former incumbent was paid and not a penny more. So in that context, we do get very involved with our clients in a number of ways. One is to understand the full compensation on offer. So it's not just base salary, but what else do you have in that total rewards context that we need to be able to convey to those candidates so they understand that full value. And one of the things that a lot of these government agencies and some financial institutions have is a pretty lovely pension plan. So let's understand the value of the pension plan, and let's consider that as part of our financial package. They often have, great rewards as it relates to, ongoing education, or, supporting individuals through various kind of life's journeys. So their mat leave replacements or paternity leave top-ups and things like that are often better than industry. So you look at the full package. So that's number one. Number two for us is, what do we say and who are we targeting? Because if we're talking to people who are money motivated, we're talking to the wrong candidates.
All right.
If we're talking to candidates who are purpose driven, then we might be talking to the right candidate. So we need to tap into, that. A lot of individuals, if you ask them the right questions, you'll find, in fact, it's not about the money. It becomes about the money because they're unhappy about some other things. And it may be right now that money is speaking loudly because of the current economic situation, but that's going to settle down. That's not a forever thing.
Yeah.
We're building for the future, not for the short run. And so if you think about it from an overall career arc perspective, you talk to the right people and you talk to them about making a difference. and working for an organization that stands for something more than making money. And I think every organization can be that organization. Even if you are an accounting firm, you can be more than just an accounting firm. You can be an accounting firm that gives back to your community. You can be an accounting firm that creates career development opportunities for your people. There's so many ways that you can tell a story that's exciting and compelling and speaks to the candidate. And we take that messaging into the market on your behalf. Or if you do it for yourself, those are the things that I think you need to consider is, what is your entire employee value proposition? What beyond money do you have to offer in the way of being an organization that cares, being an organization that's making a difference in society, and how you're doing that, how you're helping people develop their careers, how you're reskilling and upskilling people so they have the skills they need for tomorrow's jobs, things that people would actually come to work for because they're not getting that where they are. And that could be worth more than money. So there's lots of things, lots of ways, lots of tools, if you will, in the toolkit, some of which come to light when you're recruiting, and others, if you're looking at your team today and saying, what can we be doing more of, and what can we be doing a better job to retain the talent that we have?
So that's, I love that. And it's a combination of all of it. I mean, you need to be competitive on compensation. That's got to be an important piece of it today for sure. But, it's engaging that passion, that motivation, as you said, for people, what that vision is of an organization, how they feel like they belong. If companies that, win at that or are really good at that, are likely going to navigate this sort of time we're in. Is that kind of a good summary of how you're seeing that?
100%. I think those will be the winning organizations because they don't just get people, they don't just get employees, they get passionate employees, they get engaged and committed employees, the ones that want to come to work every day, whether coming to work means coming to their kitchen table or going to the office. And when you can unlock discretionary effort to the extent that, these kinds of organizations who really invest in their people and support their people and, support their communities and give back to their communities, those are the organizations that are going to win, no question.
Yeah. And it's, this probably answers this other question, but we're talking about recession right now. And this year, 2023 being a really challenging year, and there may be layoffs and different things. I'm assuming that if you were giving advice to companies today of how to kind of be successful in retaining and attracting top talent through a recession, your answer that you just said is likely a big part of that. Is there anything else that you see that companies need to be doing right now as it relates to where the economics are at in the world?
I don't know if this is relating to the economics so much as it just is something that we haven't touched upon yet. So I want to take a moment to go there. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of companies that aren't organized really well, and that don't have great systems and processes and practices to support the work that needs to be done. And, there's never a better time than now to start working on those things. People get really frustrated with crappy technology. They get really frustrated if their jobs are poorly defined, or if there's a whole body of work that should be being done by somebody but isn't being done by anyone. It's just kind of falling off the side of someone's desk because there just is no time to get to it. Organizationally, even small organizations need to be using this time, any time, to be thinking, how can we organize ourselves optimally? And how can we lead ourselves optimally? I'm doing a search right now. It's the first time ever that this mid-size accounting firm, in fact, has hired a COO. Because up until now, they've had a partner who's had marketing on the side of their desk, and another partner who's had HR on the side of her desk, and another partner who's had IT on the side of his desk. Nobody's job is any of these things. And so these things are not being done well. And because they are not being done well, the consultants and the auditors and the tax folks and the admins are frustrated because there's gaps in how we're doing things. And the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So you need to attend to how you organize yourselves and how you organize your work, because that can take a ton of frustration off the table and make people very satisfied with the way work is getting done inside the company.
Great advice. Great advice. I've seen that play out in companies I've been involved in. And, I think that that's very, very powerful at times when things are slower. It's leveraging that, it's improving that foundation, that process. That's great advice. I want to just Tim, segue a little bit.
Sorry, I just wanted to say you don't have to hire someone. You don't have to hire someone externally to do that. You can look internally and select someone who's ready for that next challenge and give them that responsibility. Then it's a win-win. You've just promoted someone, set them up with a new challenge, and you're attending to some of the stuff that's broken inside your organization that so many companies just don't think about. But sometimes it's really basic stuff, but it can be fixed, and it can be fixed to everyone's advantage.
Well, and when it gets fixed, I'm assuming when you do fix it, your retention numbers go up quite a bit because, like you say, people are now not frustrated with those issues, and that's probably a big part. As you said, it's not always about income; it's about job satisfaction and whether they like doing what they're doing every day. I think that's bang on. I want to, when it comes to selecting a search firm to partner with. And I just want to bring it back to your company and as you're coaching people, what criteria should employers look for in making a decision around what type of a search firm to work with?
Oh, gosh, that's a leading question. Let's see how I can spin that to my advantage. Let me see. So I think that there are a number of factors to consider. I think a lot of people and companies stay local. I don't know that that's necessary, but I understand why they do that, feeling that if it's the firm down the street that their buddy used, that's good enough for me. I would challenge people to think more broadly about, what to look for in a search firm. And joking aside, I think you want to look for a firm that has longevity. So that's been around for a number of years and has a good long track record of being successful in solving these issues for their clients, where there's actually tenure on the team. So not a lot of turnover, because that tells me the same thing about a search firm as it tells me about anybody else. It's that this is a great place to work. People love what they do and they stay. And that's usually a very good sign. I would choose a firm that has a leveraged model, because I think that in such a firm, you've got research consultants that are really good at digging out the talent that you want to go get, and then partners that do a really good job of assessing that talent. And, partners can do it all, but if they're doing it all, they're probably loving one part of their job more than the other, and maybe not being as thorough as they could otherwise be. Of course, you have to look for, track record. But I think sometimes companies choose the firm that has lots of experience in a specific industry. And I put more stock on, working with a firm that you feel a really strong connection to. As long as they have some experience in your industry, that should be sufficient. But don't work with a firm just because they've got a big brand or they've got a big snazzy head office. Work with a firm that you really feel is going to take the time to both really understand your needs and where your organization is and needs to go, and then is going to dedicate the time to helping you get there and not pass you off to somebody else. Right.
No, that's perfect. And even in our experience working with groups like yours, COVID has really changed a lot of that. In the past, we probably would have picked a group down the street to help us hire people. And we always thought that whoever we found was going to be somebody local. And I think that remote work and that has really changed perspectives on, well, where is the talent? It doesn't have to be in Alberta. I know for us as an example, I know we've actually through your organization and others, actually we can work remotely and we can actually create hybrid types of work environments where we're maybe hiring somebody of Ontario, where there's maybe more talent to choose from. So I think that's definitely changed. And then maybe from that perspective, being able to work with organizations, like you say, that aren't just down the street, that have access to talent differently. So
right.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to just segue now a little bit. If companies want resources or want to learn more about what your organization does, or just recruitment in general, or kind of some of these issues, how can they reach out to you? What are some resources you can suggest that may be a good place for them to start?
Well, reaching out to me is super easy. It's lisa.knight@lhh.com. Our firm's website is LHH I think you can back into it through LHH, but you're better just to go straight to LHH Knightsbridge. That's the recruitment business in Canada. In terms of resources, again, if you're interested, we a lot of my perspective on these trends and what's happening in business today comes through obviously lots of reading and lots of discussion with various clients. But we also recently put out a white paper that Adecco actually developed after having spoken to some 3,000 employees across the globe, or 30,000 employees across the globe. My apologies. And I'd be happy to share that. I don't know if there's a way that I can get that to you, Tim, or make that available to the audience. But it's a really great resource because it's called the talent conundrum, and it goes into some detail around some of the topics that we touched upon today and what companies can be doing to win the war for talent.
Yeah, that's perfect, Lisa. And I'd love to read that white paper. Maybe you can share that with me. We can maybe collaboratively share it a bit on social media and through some of the websites that we've got. We're happy to share that with our audience and maybe do some links post this session. So thank you for that.
Of course.
And I just on that note, Lisa, I just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much for taking the time today to meet with us out of your busy schedule. As expected, you shared your experience, your insights. I know I got a lot out of the conversation today. I'm sure our listeners did. So again, thank you so much. And I hope that you have a great break. You have a wonderful holiday, and I'll look forward to reconnecting with you when you're back in town.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Tim. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I don't do this very often, as I think you know, but it was a great pleasure, and it was a lot of fun. So let's do it again sometime. If there's a new topic that you think could be of interest, it's a lot of fun.
I'd love that. And you're a natural. So thank you again so much for sharing your time with us today. And on that note, that ends this edition of the Innovative Accountant Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our episode today. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Innovative Accountant Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and even learned something new. If you're interested in elevating your firm and transforming your client experience to create sustainable firm growth, get in touch with us by visiting integratedadvisory.ca to set up your free call with one of our integrated advisory experts. Visit integratedadvisory.ca today to set up your free call with an integrated advisory expert. Be sure to subscribe to the Innovative Accountant Podcast so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in for the next episode of the Innovative Accountant Podcast. Production of the podcast is by @Heart Creative and can be found online at @heartcreative.com.